Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for swinging by and hanging out with us again today on Todd-versations. What a great show we have. I've been talking for almost an hour with this guy. We haven't even started recording yet. I am so excited that he's here to hang out with. He's a publisher. He's a producer. He's a host. He picks guitar. He's an all-around good guy. He certainly puts the word bull into bulldog. I can tell you that much right now. Southeast Produce Weekly, and he's the host of RFD-TV's Where the Food Comes From. Give it up for my brother from another mother, Chip Carter. Welcome, Chip.
Hey, Todd, thanks for having me on.
It is absolutely a pleasure.
People don't usually get the peek behind the scenes, but you told them we already talked an hour before you pressed record. So, yeah, they should have heard that.
Well, they probably should have heard the first hour. They probably because we were everywhere in the first hour. It was the funny. I tell you, we both looked up at each other like we've been talking for an hour. We haven't even.
Maybe we should hit record and start getting some of this.
Exactly.
But we probably already used our good stuff now, Todd. So it's.
I know I wrote some good stuff down. We're good. We'll get back around to it. I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good. I think there's more in the tank. There's more in the tank.
Well,
like I told you, I'm as fired up as a one-eyed rat staring at two holes right now. So I'm excited for this conversation. There's no two ways about it. Before we get started, I'm just going to throw it out there. Just tell everybody real quick. I don't want to read your bio because it sounds so campy when I do it. Tell it from your heart. Just tell everybody who you are and a little bit of your journey. And then I got 157,911 questions I want to throw at you.
And I've got that many answers. So
thank God.
I'm a preacher's kid from the country. I was born in Georgia and I grew up in Georgia, a little while in Texas, but everywhere we were was just little farm towns. I remember I was 7 years old the first time I got in a cab of an air-conditioned tractor, and it was out in the West Texas Panhandle. I didn't ever want to get out of there. So these were the people I knew. This was the life I knew. This is my family. All of my grandparents and their parents had been in farming. On my dad's side, they were gentlemen farmers, which meant they paid other people to do the work while they watched. And my mom's side was sharecroppers. And, my granddad had land, and my great granddad had land, and my granddad worked for him. And it was just handed down generationally. And then things that we don't even think about now that drove people out of farming. There was no protections. There was no offsets, but there was something called the boll weevil. And if you were a cotton farmer in Georgia in the 30s and 40s and 50s, that was a very bad thing to see coming. And the boll weevil eventually ran my mother's family out of farming. So I've got a couple of nephews who are poking around at it, but the Carters got ran out of farming. So that changed my world. And also as that small town kid, I packed peaches. I sprayed cane. I cut cane. I baled hay. We did all those things. I did enough of that to know by the time I was 18 years old, all I wanted was out. I just wanted to get out of the country. And I knew I wanted to tell stories. I knew there was something calling me. I didn't know if it was going to be a TV or a newspaper or a guitar or what it was going to be, but I knew that that's just what I did. What are you doing? People ask me all the time, what do you do? I say, I'm a storyteller.
Yeah.
That's it. I'll pick a different medium. Anything but visual arts, because I can't even draw a conclusion. But other than that, it's in my wheelhouse, and I just started trying to figure out how to use it. And I did what, a lot of people do. Most people do. I went the big city route. I got into the mainstream media. I started, working for newspapers. By the time before I was 30, I became one of the youngest internationally syndicated columnists in history. I signed on with the Chicago Tribune to write about video games, which I know will make a lot of people who know me go, what?
Yeah.
But there was no national mainstream media presence about video games. It was just something that was considered kids stuff. And Nintendo was something that your grandkids played or your kids played. It couldn't be serious. It couldn't be a real thing. But I saw then in the early 90s that gaming would come to be the predominant entertainment media, at least especially in terms of dollars generated. And that happened 20 years ago, that switch happened. So I walked those roads. Also, I wrote a column for the Washington Post for a couple of years. But early on, I had seen the writing on the wall for newspapers, and I knew it wasn't good. I'd been an early beta tester for Apple on the first online community. It was actually before AOL. It was called eWorld. And the first time, this was like 94, and they sent me a Mac. And the first time I saw it on a computer and there were other people there, I knew the world had changed. And I knew that what we were looking at was the entire entertainment spectrum, newspaper, television, radio, all was going to be rolled into this one first box that we had on our desk, and then little thing we put in a briefcase and carried with us, and now in the palm of our hand.
Yeah, your back pocket.
So I saw that newspapers did not have a role in that. So I started cultivating these other sides and these other areas where I walk. I went and joined AOL. Started writing and producing for several of their properties, including Huffington Post, which people still sometimes raise their eyes and go, "You were right for the Huffington Post." I don't anymore, but I did. And they're like, "Why would you do that? That makes you a little suspect." And I'm kind of, yeah, they got 3 million readers a month.
And those checks cleared.
I'm trying to get messages to people. I don't care what your political affiliation is. I don't care. I learned from my father, the minister. Ain't no point in preaching to the choir. Those folks are already there.
Yeah, no doubt.
So,
no doubt.
You got to spread the word. You got to do a little evangelizing. You got to do a little proselytizing. You got to get out in the country and show them where it's at.
I love it.
And for me, where it was at for a long time was video games, and that let me raise a family and be home with the kids and travel with the kids. We went all over the world. It was fantastic. And then, it was all kind of starting to peter down. And I felt as much fun as I had with video games, I felt the need for something more meaningful in my life. Something more meaningful to do with whatever skills that I have. And I started looking around. I've always been fascinated by farming. I didn't leave the country and farming because I hated it. I left because I couldn't stay in small towns and do the things that I wanted to do. And that's a big problem in rural America today. That rural divide, we lose so much of our talent from the small towns because there's simply no opportunity there. So I went off and had my big city media career. And then, I think it was about 2005. Well, I'd moved to Florida several years before that. And part of the reason why was I wanted the kids to be able to see, look, there's food growing on that tree. There's strawberries coming out of the ground. Look, we play soccer in an orange grove. Isn't this cool? And they always thought so. And by the time they were about 15, I think my son came home one day from school, and I said, "You want a Coke?" He says, "No, thanks, Dad." And I'm like, "Why not? It's delicious." He said, "Well, it's got this high fructose corn syrup." I said, "Yeah, it's delicious."
It's good.
It's good. What's your problem? What's wrong with you? I raised you better than that. You from Georgia, boy. But he says, "Dad," he says, "your body," he said, "that your body doesn't recognize that. It doesn't know what it is. It doesn't know how to process it." I'm like, number one, that's fascinating. Number two, 15-year-old kids are talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I started listening. One thing I always did when I was young is I sought out the company of older people, and I listened to them and I paid attention to what they were saying. As that started to flip, I started to be on the older end of the spectrum. I continued, and I still continue to seek out the counsel of younger people, and I listen to them and I pay attention to what they're saying. So my kids, it was our kids' generation that told me this. Just listening to them, all of a sudden they were very interested. My kids were more closely connected than most because of my roots. We never got like so many families now, 3 and 4 and 5 generations from the farm. We never had that kind of disconnect. Now, my kids never did any farm work, but their daddy sure did. So, to look up and see that kind of groundswell and know that was coming, I started thinking, I said, I want to angle to be in the food space. I think there's something calling me there.
Neat.
I think there's something here. And I think it's going to be a big deal. And I think it's actually going to be sea change. It's not going to be a fad. It's not going to be, oh, this is hip for a minute. This is going to be generational change. And that's exactly what we've seen.
Hi, I'm Nate Hefty, Vice President of Sales at Superior Fresh, the nation's largest aquaponic farm located in central Wisconsin. Thank you for listening to Todd-versations and Todd Bits. Check us out at www.superiorfresh.com to learn how we raise our Atlantic salmon on a non-GMO organic diet. And they thrive in water naturally filtered by our USDA certified organic leafy greens, never treated with hormones, antibiotics, or pesticides, and packed with 2 times the omega-3s. This is salmon as it should be. Shop with us online and use the discount code TLC 2022 to receive free shipping on all of our American Heart Association's Heart Health Checked Atlantic salmon. At Superior Fresh, we are changing how food is grown to change the world. Remember the code TLC 2022 to get free shipping.
By 2009, I was ready to make the move, and I went to work with one of the produce trade publications. Anybody who knows me knows which one. So, and they brought me on just to cover Florida. And I honestly came into it. I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this for 6 months, and I'm going to see where it goes, and I'm going to see if there's anything to this. And it was about 6 weeks, Todd, and I was on my way home from another farm. Now, I had not been back and set foot on a farm technically probably since I left the country. Even though the kids had been in groves and strawberry fields and everything, we weren't hanging out on commercial farms and things like that. So it had been a minute. It had been a while. Had not lost touch with all the people because my dad, right up until the very end of his life, was a Methodist circuit rider minister. He had 4 little country churches, and the biggest congregation was 30, and the smallest one was 3. So he'd preach at 2 of those on one Sunday morning and 2 the next Sunday morning. So whenever I was in Georgia, I was still going and seeing Dad. So I had not lost touch with the people, but what they did, I had completely lost touch with. And
unbelievable.
I was about 6 weeks. I was on the way home from another visit to a farm, and I called my mom. I said, Mom, I remember where they left the good people. And I think at that moment, I knew I was going to be here. And then just very shortly, Todd, to be able to see where farming was when I left it at 18 or 19 and where it had gone, the people were all the same, but the way they do what they do was just dramatically changed. Yeah. I mean, it was just, jet age kind of stuff.
Sure.
And it was just fascinating. And I knew I already had the idea for a TV show in mind even then. I've got the first script treatment for what became Where the Food Comes From is in my files dated 2009. But I got in the industry and I realized in a hurry, I didn't know enough about this to come out and speak about it authoritatively. I had no business coming out as a subject matter expert on a subject that I thought I knew a lot about, and turns out I did not know anything about. So I spent the next few years learning and traveling, and if they said go, I went. I started out to cover Florida. Next thing you know, I was in Florida and Georgia. Next thing you know, I looked up, I'd been named Southeastern editor. I didn't even know it. I read it in the paper. So, and then they started asking, do you want to go to Texas? Do you want to go to Philadelphia? Do you want to go up and down the ports of the Delaware River and see what's going on there? Yes, 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 and yes. Do you want to go to Canada and look at the industry there? Absolutely. Come on out to California IA. I hear it's nice this time of year. So I went. Now, I'm not talking about going for a visit for a day or 2. I'm talking about going and landing somewhere and being 3 weeks in the Rio Grande Valley, and every day tromping through more fields and a different grove and here and driving through deserts and dodging drug smugglers and everybody else. I knew this was not the kind of thing that I could do from behind a desk.
Sure.
I could not sit in this room and call people on the phone and say, tell me what's going on out there. I knew I had to get out there and get my toes in the dirt and get my nose in the dirt. And get down there and sweat with everybody else. And after 6 years of that, I felt I finally learned enough. People started referring to me as a agricultural authority. I'm like, oh, okay, well maybe fooled somebody. So that's when I started CBC3 Media, which is the parent company that launched Southeast Produce Weekly, which was designed really to serve the Southeastern trade, just serve the whole trade, but to tell the news and the stories of the Southeast. I knew then that that was just part of what we were going to be doing. And my bigger goal was to get this television show on the air and to have the consumer facing website where the food comes from, which is now live. And the show premiered on RFD-TV January 20th. We're on every Thursday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. There's a couple of other airings every week. Like they say, check your local listings. So that's kind of how it all came.
I love it.
To this point. So that was
I love
a very long answer, Todd.
No, it's actually great because there's a bunch that I want to ask you about the story you just told, because I think there's some really cool things. I want to go back to being, the son of a small town Georgia preacher, going around from a congregation of 30 down to 3 and bouncing like you did, learning that, because there's some life lessons that you learned as a kid that probably didn't manifest themselves into reality until you got out of that zip code. So can you, and I think it's really worthy when you think about, and we chatted about this before, I'm a big believer we walk a path, and we, what lessons what lessons we were taught when we were 7 may not apply until you're 49, but it's a part of that path that you're on. So share a couple of those things that you believe that, those life lessons that you came up with in Georgia like that. What have they meant to you?
It's funny you talk about leaving that zip code, but we left zip codes every 2 or 3 years. I don't think we ever lived anywhere more than 3. But that was part of what I learned, is that it doesn't matter where you go, people are the same. You're the only thing that can change in a situation like that. People are the same everywhere you go. That has held true through my life, whether I'm in Italy or England or Holland or Mexico or the United States. We're all the same. We're all the same. We've got cultural differences. We got differences in the things that we eat. We got differences in maybe what sports we like or things like that. But at the core, I really believe most human beings are decent people who are just trying to take care of their families. Yeah. And I think that's really what most people want more than anything, is to be able to live a harmonious life with their family, and to do as good as they can for their family. So those are the kind of things that you saw growing up in the country. Is it was much less important how new and nice your pickup truck was than how many friends you had and how many people liked you. And maybe your pickup truck was old, but if it broke down on the side of the road and 30 people lined up to come give you a ride, that was probably better than having a shiny new pickup truck and no friends. So these are the kind of things. And I mean, just having that country background, having those country roots. I had one small town grandma and one country grandma. So I was able to even break it down even further and see the divide between the small towns and the countryside. And it just taught me, don't discount anybody. Don't judge anybody based on where they're from or who they are or what, whether their ears are pointy or not. Find out who they are. Find out who they are. I think those experiences that I took with me at 21, I probably was not so proud of my country roots and my Southern patois, as they might say. And as I got into the big city media thing, and I'm going, I'm like, I've got to be important. I've got to be distinct. I've got to be like all of the others so that I can have the same jobs and opportunities that they have.
Well, Lord knows if you talk like that, you get hired immediately.
Immediately, yeah. I proved it. So I drilled the Southern accent out of my voice. I did everything to hide my country roots. And then when I was 29, and I signed a contract with Chicago Tribune to do the syndicated column. They actually flew me out to Vegas for the contract signing and to meet everybody and everything. And I got into the boardroom, and I'm at this huge wooden table with all these really, really important people. And, you know, sometimes things slip out. And one of my Southernisms slipped out, and somebody said, "Oh my God, you're Southern. Say that again. Talk more Southern." I realized not only was it not a detriment, it was a benefit, and it was who I was.
Yeah,
And I learned at that point to be true with my roots.
I
Um,
love that.
and I watched that begin to infuse my work. And it's funny, you mentioned earlier I do pick a little guitar, I play some music. It took me forever to get anybody to listen to me. But I mean, this is how our experiences can shape us and wrap us. I always thought I was a rock and roll singer. I always thought I was Bruce Springsteen, and that's what I was supposed to do. So for about 25 years, I made awful music that no one wanted to listen to. And it didn't have a heart. It was just always missing something, just always missing something.
Right.
And as I, slowly came back home and embraced my roots and figured out, Chip Carter, this is who you are. You be who you are. I realized I was a country singer, and I
I
wrote
love
country
that.
songs. And once I started doing that, people started listening. That's been a lot of fun. We'll talk more about that later. But I think the most important thing that I learned growing up where I grew up is just kind of always live like somebody's watching.
Mm,
Everybody thinks people in small towns are so much nicer and everything than in big cities. And they are, but not because they're better people. It's because of the accountability factor, Todd. If we're in Hayhira, Georgia, and I flip you off at the red light, you probably know who I am, and you're gonna go, "You ain't gonna believe Chip Carter flipped me off at the red light."
yeah.
But if we're in New York City and I flip you off at the red light, I'm probably never gonna see you again. So it's
Yeah.
an accountability thing.
I think that's powerful though. I mean, that's a powerful statement about accountability, in that sense. And to your point, you talk about that connectivity as well, right? I mean, and then
Mhm.
probably where your passion to get into food probably came from is from that upbringing, recognizing that food is an incredibly social experience in the South. It's a part of the culture, food as a whole, whether it's family meals. In my opinion, if you've never sat down at a dinner table with folks from the South, you've missed something in life, especially a family, right? It's a cool experience. So I can see where that connectivity, where your desire to get into that food, kind of comes back to some of what you just said.
Some of it does for sure, but I also
Yeah,
think that's the same cultural experience we have around the world, and that's part of what I love about traveling so much. And I have constantly my whole life is getting to sample and know and learn those other cultures,
for sure.
and see how other people do. I'm
Yeah,
married to a Italian girl from Jersey, so there's a family culture. It's a very
yeah.
different family culture than my family culture. But speaking directly to agriculture, I remember things like being very young, 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, and being out in the field. And the one I remember very specifically out in West Texas, I must have been 6 years old, and a farmer was growing potatoes, and they had picked most of the field, and there were just a few little culls here and there. And I found one about the size of a big marble. And I was
Uh-huh.
just fascinated with it. I was like, "That's a potato?" And they're like, "Yeah, that grew in the dirt. That grew right there.
Sure.
Wow, can I keep this potato? Not only that, why don't you bring it back to the house and we'll have it with supper? We're having potatoes for supper, so we'll cook your little potato for you." And Todd, I felt like it was like the biggest gift from God. I was just like, wow, that's my potato. And I
Hmm.
carried it. I wouldn't even put it in my pocket. I carried it home from the field, rubbing it, buffing it, shining it,
Yeah.
the whole thing. And it was just such a special connection. I went and got that potato. I brought that potato home. And when I ate that potato for dinner that night, even though it was just a bite and a half, it was the best potato I ever had.
By far.
Um, and I still have that same thing when I go to these farms. I'm not growing the stuff. I'm not, I'm not doing that.
Mm,
But I still love bringing a box home and showing everybody and
for
sharing with
sure.
everybody. We went out. We did an episode a couple of weeks ago. We filmed with Feeding America, L&M Farms, Smith Farms,
Mhm.
showing how farmers work with Feeding America and Society of St. Andrew, trying to tackle this food waste problem, and also trying to get hungry people fed. And it was funny. My wife was a nurse for many, many years.
Mhm.
And then she was a college nursing professor for the last 5 years. Last summer, she was finally able to start joining me and ride with me. So she's starting to see some of this too. And to see her, we were over in the broccoli fields with L&M and Smith Farms. We got to the end of the day, and the gleaners had already been through. And of course, there's still lots of usable stuff out there in the field. So
Mhm.
we had cut 3 or 4 heads of broccoli for for a scene we were filming. I took those and threw them in the trunk, and my wife had seen 3 or 4, and she took those and threw them in the trunk. And then before we left, I was thinking, well, we might just need 3 or 4 more. We got home with a trunk full of broccoli crowns. And it's just one of those, like, why did we bring home all of this broccoli?
Yeah.
Because it's fascinating. It's just
Yeah.
compelling. You feel like it's yours. And so we ate broccoli and everything for about the next 3 days, you know.
Sure.
And broccoli shakes, you know. And even this weekend, we were in Vidalia, Georgia for the Vidalia Onion Banquet, and we went out in the fields with our great friend John Schumann. And my
Great
wife's
guy.
been out in onion fields a couple of times, but not this time of year where it's really just like a little green onion bulb.
Right.
And we pulled one up, you know, to show it on camera and to taste it and everything. And then she pulled one up, and she was immediately, that was hers. She carried that onion around for the next 3 days. We carried it back to John Schumann's house. We kept it sitting out on the stoop so it didn't smell everything up. We put it in a plastic bag and brought it home because she's determined to bring it to one of the grandbabies. Grandma went and got that onion. This is your onion. And it's really hard to explain. I don't think anybody who's involved in growing food in our audience will have any trouble understanding that.
Mm.
That you really, you want to share that boundary. And it doesn't matter if it's one little onion or a whole crop. It's just fascinating. Where the food comes from is one of the most fascinating stories on the planet.
There's a lot of people that don't know. There's a lot of people that think that broccoli grows in the back room of
Way
their
more,
grocery store.
way more,
Yeah,
way more.
I agree with you. You know, and it's and it surprises me as much as food connects us that there is a disconnect in a lot of different ways. And I think that being able to educate folks, whether it's this platform, your platform, to be able to have some of these conversations, to bring some of these brands, ideas, people to the forefront that they got
Hmm.
to recognize, it's really powerful. I mean, food is a very, very powerful thing. It's medicine. It can hurt you, can help you. There's a lot of positive things that can come from it. There's no two ways about it. But it's an incredible story to tell, and there is so many great stories out there. We were back and forth on a couple of them earlier. There's a lot of really cool people out doing some really, really cool things, and that's why I personally am a big fan of what you're doing, because I love the stories that are coming out, especially the way you go about doing them. And I want to get into that a little bit later on, a little bit more depth about the whole show itself and the whole concept of why and where and the whole 9 yards. But you know, it's important. It's important that we embrace food. You know, and you talked a little bit about food waste, and and one of the ways that we can work together on food waste is to work to increase consumption, right? Especially in the produce sector,
Hmm.
right? How much more better? I know what a great way of doing it is by getting more consumption of these things that are going to make a positive difference in our lives. So I think it's great. I really do. Thanks for sharing it. I think it's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
I learned something I learned on the Feeding America shoot was that even after a field is harvested, as much as 40% of that crop never makes it to a market.
Right.
And so that's why we thought it was very important to show that aspect of Feeding America
Yeah.
coming in, and Society of St. Andrew, who is much smaller, much less known. In fact, most people might not be familiar with them. Do you know them, Society of St. Andrew?
Mm-mm.
They're a gleaning society.
Yeah.
And everybody goes, what is gleaning? Well, that's when after commercial harvest is done, whatever's left in the field, and it's there's biblical references to gleaners.
Correct.
There's a famous painting called The Gleaners. People would come back through the fields and recover whatever was left behind for their sustenance, and now there's so much left in the field. Society of St. Andrew is a volunteer gleaning society.
Right.
They will actually come through and pick a farmer's fields after harvest. We get in contract situations where a deal moves on. In Florida, strawberries grow abundantly well into May. But the retail industry switches over to Mexico and California 1st of April, no matter what Florida berries are doing. So what are you going to do with all that fruit? No farmer wants to waste food. Nobody wants to plow a crop under. Years ago, what they would do is open it up and say, so you pick, come out and get whatever you want. But now the technology in the fields, the care you have to take with the fields, the controls that have to be on a field, you can't just have hundreds of people tromping through your fields, picking stuff. So where's the solution? Society of St. Andrew comes and gleans it. Feeding America picks it up. Just for this story, we worked with Feeding America the first day to see their pickup and scheduling model and all that kind of stuff. Right. And that was at L&M Farms. And then at Smith Farms, Society actually came in and we were there for a glean. And they brought hundreds of pounds of fresh broccoli out of that field that would have otherwise gone to waste. And then we were able to follow it that afternoon. We were in the fields with Society of St. Andrew that morning. That afternoon, within 4 hours, we were at the local food bank to see the distribution of that food. And it's extraordinary what people are doing. Farmers, they're ingenious. They're indefatigable. You can't keep them down. They're never going to quit. They're never going to quit. But they're also, their hearts almost to a one. I can't think of a farmer I've ever met who I walked away going, really hate that guy. He's really not, even the scratchiest, rawest farmer, it has still got something at the heart of them that makes them want to farm. There's easier ways to make a living, Todd.
Oh yeah, there are. And
like what you and me do.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, farmers are big risk takers. They go out, they put their, every crop they put in, they run that risk of it not working. Their family's dependent upon that crop working. It's one of the most challenging jobs that you're ever going to face. It's one of the most rewarding jobs you'll ever have, but it certainly is one of the most challenging jobs. And I've seen it in my whole career. I've seen, these guys working 24 hours trying to save something, see, the things that they've had to do. There's a lesson in passion. If you get around farmers enough, there's a lesson in passion that I don't think you'll find in other places because of the connection to the earth, the connection to Mother Nature, the connection to the sun, the wind, the rain, the bugs, the boll weevils, all of them, right? And I think
the connection to humanity.
Yeah.
And the connection to the care for their fellow man. But farming is the only industry in the world where you dig a hole in the ground, pour all your money in it, and then pray for something to come up.
Yeah.
But at least I thought it was the only industry in the ground in the world where you did that until I started a TV show. So now I can really relate.
Now you can relate.
Dig a big hole in the ground, pour all your money in it, and pray for something to come up. And thank God it is. So it is.
At least you're, it's better than saying you got a bag of money, you roll the window down, and you're hoping to keep it in the back of the car, right? That's a little better. At least it's going. At least you know where to dig it back up.
That's right. I know where it is. That's for sure.
When you did, and you guys did the Southeast Produce Weekly publication. That was definitely, I think, a culmination of the path, the direction you've kind of gone. Talk a little bit about what motivated you to dive into that. And then I think a two-part question I'm going to throw at you because it seems to make sense. What is the produce industry because you've seen it from a global scale. So I want to pinpoint just specifically on the South and Southeast. What is the produce industry in the Southeast taught you? And maybe we throw it back to some of the things when the son of the Georgia preacher, when you were young, those life lessons you got. Kind of wrap that up for me a little bit, if you could.
It was it was great relearning the industry the way that I did, getting to, like I said earlier, start in Florida, spread out to Georgia, then the Southeast, and here, then there. Because it was not just people who I was familiar with in the Southeastern industry. It was literally people I grew up with. These were our friends and family and the congregations of our churches, and it didn't matter if it was Tequila, Georgia, or Franklin, Georgia, or Cary, Texas, or Madison, Georgia. The people were going to be the same, and that was going to be the same. So when I came into the industry, I understood them, and that was great. And I think it made it easier for me to just focus on, what are y'all doing? What are y'all doing? Now, to be fair, there was a lot of places I went for the first 2 years, and I just had a camera hanging around my neck and a reporter's notepad in my hand, and for about 2 years. This is another thing about this industry. Every question I asked anybody got one of two answers: yes, sir, or no, sir, and that was it. And when I kept sniffing around and coming around long enough, they finally said, well, maybe he's all right. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more. Right. And that's, it was a persistence. It was an honest effort to gain their trust and to earn their trust and be worthy of their trust, and to let them understand, I really am here to tell your story. I'm not here to tell my story. Right. I'm not trying to slip in the back door and go, they use pesticides. Right. There's just a million conversations. It's just so much more complex. All of it is just so much more complex. So for the people in the Southeast to get to know me and start to vouch for me was huge as I spread out from this space, and as I started going nationally and internationally. I discovered the exact same thing. The farmers are the same everywhere. What we do see in the Southeast, and we started Southeast Produce Weekly, and it continues as its own newsletter now that will highlight the Southeastern interest in where the food comes from. But I think what that started was, it was a region that felt kind of like, with the existing trade media, they didn't always get a voice. Their dollars were very welcome, but their agendas did not maybe get the same kind of attention that other areas of the country did. I can't speak to whether that's the case or not. I saw an opportunity and a need, and I had a lot of people asking me for it. It's kind of like, can't we do something? Can't we do something? I'm like, yes, we can. So we have, and we did. And again, that was all part of Southeast Produce Weekly, was just the opening door. That's the one we could afford to do first.
Yeah, right.
And that's where we knew we'd get support from the industry, because I had so many great friends here. And it's not just friends who are, it's kind of like, oh, I'll throw some money at it. It's people who understood what my vision was. And before I left place A to go start place B, I made some long drives. I went and talked to some very key people whose opinions I valued greatly and whose support I valued greatly. And 2 of 1, they were all like, we're in. We believe in what you're doing. Yeah. We'll ride with you. So, and it was just enough to get going. And, I can't say there was any hardship in those first couple of years. We weren't rich, but we were growing, and everything we were making was plowing back into the company. But we didn't miss any meals either. The goal, we had a 3-year business plan from the day that Southeast Produce Weekly went live in March of 2017. The goal was in 3 years to have Where the Food Comes From on the air as a television series. Right. And somehow, you talk about walking this path, and whatever enlightens that path, whether you choose to call it God or destiny or fate or whatever it is to you.
Mm-hmm.
I felt those forces at work. And those first 3 years just went like a dream. Now, I didn't walk around at the start of this saying, I'm going to make a TV show and I'm going to put all y'all on TV, because they'd have hauled me off to the nutty house. As we'd say in Georgia, they'd have carried me to Milledgeville. So that's where the home for the criminally insane was when I was growing up. So we were always, Milledgeville hung over our heads like a threat. It's actually a lovely little town. So I didn't know how any of this was going to happen. I had started producing video for the other trade publication I was with, and I'd done that a couple of years. I wasn't even on camera. I was just the producer, and we had a couple of spokespeople, a couple of anchor people who were selected by the publisher, and I worked with them. And then that's how we'd cover trade shows and things like that. And when we went out in the field and went to the farms, there wasn't even a narrator. It was just, we were just, it's very common on the internet to not have someone standing there going, this is a broccoli field. This is a broccoli farmer. You didn't need that when the broccoli farmer could just stand there and go, hey, you see broccoli, right? And I'm a farmer, so you know that's who I am. You don't need someone to tell you that.
Right.
So we were doing those kind of videos. And then when I started Southeast Produce Weekly, I knew that was, obviously I had a plan for a TV show. I knew that was a key component of it.
Sure.
But we kept making them that way. We kept making them with they were narrative driven, not narrator driven. So the story was telling itself, and the people on the camera were the ones telling the story, and I was still behind the camera. Started building a relationship. I knew about RFD-TV. At that time, they had been in a bad deal with Dish Network, so that Dish had the exclusive rights to their HD feed. So even in 2017, the RFD signal on other providers was still that old grainy, standard def channel. And I was kind of waiting. I'm kind of like, that's going to run out someday, and they're going to be HD everywhere. And I said, I want to be in a position when they do to be part of that. And so I built a relationship with their marketing team. We started giving publicity to some RFD TV shows and
Molly B Polka Party, baby.
Sharing their news. Molly B Polka Party, Hee Haw, which was my grandparents' favorite. But then, even more importantly at that time, and some of what the focus is now, the big draw at that time was Farm Her. Margie Geiler-Alanis' show that focuses on women in agriculture, and it's fantastic. And that was the direction that they saw to go somewhere new, and that's more where the network is going now. Is shows like Margie's show and our show. There's always going to be plenty of room on RFD-TV for the Jimmy Dean show and the Molly B Polka Party. These people have got, they got audiences, they got fans, they got,
I love Molly. I mean, I joke. I love Molly B Polka Party. It's fantastic. If you haven't sat down and watched Molly B, you're missing something good.
You are, and Larry's Country Diner. He brings out these legendary songwriters and everything. They sit around and pick guitars and tell the stories of the songs. Yeah, so there's some good programming on there. But the goal. My first goal was to just get in touch with them. And so through the marketing backdoors of giving away free publicity for several months, when their HD channel went live, I was ready because we had the videos, we had the archive. I already knew what I was going to show them if I could get anybody to take a look. And we were heading into the PMA Fresh Summit in New Orleans in 2017. And in the days coming up to that, I thought it was finally time. And I got in touch with their marketing people. I said, by the way, we've been making all of these videos as we go. And if we're heading to a big show, if we could be of any help, maybe the news side could use us. So I sent them a bunch of clips and they looked and they're like, and this conversation actually happened on the drive to PMA, Todd, on the drive to Fresh Summit. So I left Tampa not knowing, and by the time I got to New Orleans, I knew that we were going to move forward as a future on the air with RFD-TV.
That's exciting.
It was just super cool.
Well,
so they didn't want us to do anything for that show. But we came back and we had a couple more meetings, and it all looked good. And I'm kind of like, here we go. We're going to start putting stuff on the news. We're going to start getting produce on the air on national television. And then the final domino fell. They're kind of like, all right, this is all great. We love it. We love everything you're doing. They said, but there's one thing. Now remember, we didn't have a narrator. We didn't have a reporter. We didn't have that. This is broccoli. This is a farmer.
Right.
And they said, we can't do it without someone on the air, without a narrator. I'm kind of like, well, I'm sure we can find somebody. They said, why don't you come out from behind the camera and stand in front of it and do exactly what you're doing now. Do exactly what you're doing now, just in front of the camera. So, I was like, all right, here we go. And so somehow, Todd, I drew these lines in the sand in late 2016 and early 2017. And I set these objectives that were absolutely ridiculous. I mean, just ridiculous. So ridiculous, I didn't dare tell people about television or about my plans for television, because they'd go, boy, he's lost it now, delusions of grandeur or whatever. But I knew it was there, and it was just that path that you talk about. It was illuminated. Yeah. And it said, these are the things, these are the pieces. And every bit of it required what every farmer in the world does every day, which is yet another giant leap of faith.
Hi, I'm Nate Hefty, Vice President of Sales at Superior Fresh, the nation's largest aquaponic farm located in central Wisconsin. Thank you for listening to Todd-versations and Todd Bits. Check us out at www.superiorfresh.com to learn how we raise our Atlantic salmon on a non-GMO organic diet. And they thrive in water naturally filtered by our USDA certified organic leafy greens, never treated with hormones, antibiotics, or pesticides, and packed with 2 times the omega-3s. This is salmon as it should be. Shop with us online and use the discount code TLC 2022 to receive free shipping on all of our American Heart Association's Heart Health Checked Atlantic salmon. At Superior Fresh, we are changing how food is grown to change the world. Remember the code TLC 2022 to get free shipping.
Thinking about to your time in, at the Tribune in Chicago, starting out, right? Because print was basically king for the most part. You had 3 TV stations, basically, for lack, basically, the big 3. That was your news source. Now you're in this new world today, right? The lens of history is a little different, right? Looking back now to where we are from the news. I mean, the news is all over the board. There's a bunch of words you can associate it with it, however you want to go. I'm not really interested in going down the trail. But so you go off to create this show, right? I want to talk about a little bit more in depth about the TV show itself, right? Because you guys, you're talking from laboratory to legislation. Really, it's a top-down view. You're really bringing out some really, really good stories. So again, kind of throw a little bit of a curveball question at you. The impetus, when you started thinking about really getting here, the media world has changed. Has that affected you in any way? Do you feel differently now about being on TV than you did when you were really kicking this around, years back, because it is so much different? You have more concerns about being out there today in any way?
Not really. This is the boat I chose to get on. And this is, if it's a bucking bronco, well, I'm the one who put the saddle on. So sure, nobody forced me to do any of this. Even when RFD said, "Why don't you come out from around the camera?" There was a part of me that said, "Yeah, that sounds fun. Let's go do that." And that was 100% right. It's been an absolute blast. But the changes in media, it's crazy. When I was syndicated with the Chicago Tribune, my audience every week was in the hundreds of millions. Yeah. I mean, we can't even calculate that in 2022. The idea of a Seinfeld type TV show that 25 million people were going to tune into every single week. There used to be, everybody go to work the next day and you're all talking about the same show. because
Right.
that's what everybody watched. You're all talking about the article you read in the newspaper that
Sure.
morning,
Sure. Sure.
but no. So how's it different? I think the biggest, most disturbing way that it's different is there's no instant credibility and there's no instant verifiability. In the old media structure, when we had Chicago Tribunes and New York Timeses and Washington Postes and NBC and CBS, you knew that even though you might not like everything they said, they were probably telling the truth.
Right.
And now when you're online and in online media, especially, you don't know if this is a credible, reliable, trustable source, or if it's some disgruntled nut living in his mom's basement who is just able to use the power of technology to make it look like he's got some big grand stand to get up on and some reason for people to listen to it.
Yeah.
So, in that same time period, we've gone from, people understanding that there are people who are good at different things. Farmers are good at farming, and people like you and me are good at talking, and and scientists are good at doing science, and researchers are good at doing research. And I think this lack of a grounded, credible, verifiable media structure has kind of left us all grasping for straws, and it's all made us experts and idiots at the same time. And we don't know who to believe. But I mean, I know people who couldn't pass a science test in 4th grade who now think they know more than the world's top scientists.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, no doubt. No, you're right. I mean,
we're kind of
it's really easy.
Yeah, we're kind of in a credibility blackout right now, and it's just very difficult to know what's correct and what's not.
Yeah, I would agree. And to your point, people, anybody can have a voice and hide behind it, right? When you type something, that's not a voice, right? When you speak something, you see, in order for a voice to work, it has to come out of your mouth, right?
That's true.
Writing, and I think sometimes we find ourselves, you're seeing stuff that comes out, but it's just like, that's just so disappointing, right? And has no place. And I think that's a lot of what we see out there today. What is the show? And I mean, just kind of sum up a little bit about the show, which, I mean, I hope everybody gets to check it out. It's a wonderful show, by the way. And I'm going to give you some props. I enjoy it. I sent you an email the other day about the mushroom guys. That guy was a trip. But what is the show? I mean, from your heart, what does the show mean to you? Because I think that's what's really impactful about the show. Because brother, you wear the show on your sleeve, right?
Yeah,
there's no BS in you, right? There's no BS factor when you're on the show. You know exactly where your heart stands. So tell me a little bit about what the show means, because I think that's what's going to draw people to the concept of what you're trying to do.
Honestly, every time I step in front of the camera, I'm talking to my grandparents. I'm talking to my grandparents.
That's powerful. That's powerful.
Coming from where I came from and the time and the era that I came from, I look at my parents' world and my grandparents' world, and their parents' world, and I see things that I thought were eternal, that were part of my legacy and history, that are just going away. They're just going away. And in part, I'm not willing to let those go unhonored and unnoticed. I think of how many millions of dirt farmer families there've been, and this is an era that's going to pass us over, and in 200, 300 years, when we're doing food a whole different way,
right?
It's an era that's not going to be remembered. I'd like to make some of those scratch on the wall that says we was here, and we was working. We were out. We were out in the dirt. We were feeding ourselves, and we were feeding other people. And
I love that.
That's really where I try to. That's where I try to bring it from. We at the same time, with a very progressive and forward-looking view, because as much as I honor where we came from, I'm much more interested in where we're going. But I don't think you can know one adequately without knowing both.
100%.
You can't know where you're going without knowing where you came from. So we're trying to honor those things. We're trying to put those, collective shout outs and put together kind of a top-down view of who we are now, especially in rural America at this point in life, and who these farmers are, who is this farm generation, who is this farm population. In so doing, we're stretching roots out into the past and telling some of those stories, and we're stretching out way into the future and looking at what's coming next and what's coming right around the corner.
Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah.
And let's talk about the next generation of farmers, because it's something I talk about all the time. It's an area that I find great concern in when you take a look at what the stats are coming out of the USDA that says we don't have a second generation or a third generation coming, and that's a problem. I mean, if somebody's outgrowing corn and he ain't growing corn, we got to figure out where the corn's coming from, right? I mean, it's the math. The math is pretty simple. Like I always say, I went to Woodland Elementary, but I learned math early. But at the end of the day, that's a problem. Talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing and your perception of the problem about next generation farmers, because you're in an area. The South is an area where that generation, in some ways, is more existent than perhaps in others. But just share a little bit of what you're seeing.
And it's really important to keep in mind how extensively I've traveled throughout the rest of the nation too.
Sure.
So it's not just a one-sided view.
For sure.
I hear this constantly, and the average age of the American farmer is 57 years old. What are we going to do? Do you know what the average age of the American farmer was when John F. Kennedy was president? 53.
53.
It's not. It hasn't changed that much.
Right.
And I hear all these numbers, and I hear all this gloom and doom, and I hear all these concerns. But also, when Kennedy was president, 51% of Americans made their living from agriculture, either upstream or downstream. If it wasn't direct, upstream or downstream, over half the country made their living from agriculture. Now it's 1.5%. So I think the bigger concern is not the numbers of people coming, who are the next generation of farmers going to be. Everywhere I go, Todd, I see young people coming into farming. I see people 20 and 30 clamoring to get into farming. I see people who are 40 years old trying to push their moms and dads on out the door so they can get their crack at it. And I think also one thing that kind of skews the numbers a lot is I've never met a retired farmer.
That ain't going to happen.
It's just, they may step away from day-to-day duties and running the office, but they're still there. So, when your workforce, when you're reporting that your CEO is 87 years old, that might spike your numbers some. I think there are a lot of grassroots efforts going on that I see and that I'm aware of as I travel that are engendered towards bringing young people into farming and who are trying to create opportunity. South Carolina University, South Department of Agriculture, and they're not the only ones. They've got a great program where they're connecting young people who want to get into farming with older people who it's time for them to stop, and either the kids aren't interested in taking over the farm or whatever the reason. This is a story we hear all the time. Mom and dad built the farm, and then the kids just grew up with money and they don't want to be farmers. So what happens to the farm? Well, in South Carolina, this part of the Department of Agriculture now connects those young farmers who are looking in with those old farmers who don't have anything to do with their legacy. And they're handing off that legacy and making it an affordable buyout so that it sustains the farmer who's selling it and also makes it feasible for the younger farmers to get in. I think we're going to see more and more of that kind of stuff across the nation. And I think it's already happening. I think so much of it is grassroots. I think USDA does a great job. I've got a lot of good friends over there. Hey, Faith. But they don't know everything, and nobody knows everything. That's what is so important to me, Todd, about not doing this job behind a desk. You got to be out in that small town. You got to talk to the kids at Walmart or whatever, and what does it feel like in your town? Well, we're probably gonna go into farming. We're gonna do, and you just see, every time I get a email from a community college saying, we're starting a beginning agriculture program or something like that. I see these sparks, and I don't know. People ask me all the time, what can we do to get more young people in farming? I don't know. I saw a sign last week at the North Carolina State Farmers Market in Raleigh. It was at the Market Restaurant, and it says, opportunity is missed by most people because it wears overalls and looks a lot like work.
That's true. It's true.
It's that really struck me. I took a picture of that.
Yeah, well, you're right, though. But we need to be empowering these young people, though. We need to be embraced. The industry needs to be embracing and driving, folks.
Agreed. But here's the $1 million question: we have crops that go unharvested because we can't, even though we've had and have record unemployment and up and down. There's still people without jobs. We just came through a crisis of epic proportion, where there were so many people unemployed, and yet we've got jobs by the score that can't be filled in agriculture because they're just, nobody wants to do them. Everybody's like, well, this generation is just too lazy. They're not going to do it, or what? Well, that's kind of the progression of evolution. I didn't raise my kids saying, I want you to be a lettuce picker. It's just, and there is no shame in an honorable profession, but we all want our kids to do better. My mom, when she was 3 years old, she had to pick a sack of cotton as tall as she was before she could go play. So, we didn't.
Yeah, it's different.
I didn't have a cotton field for my kids to work in.
Right.
So, I think part of it, we've grown up in a air conditioned world. I mean, I was part of that, in the South here, especially the transition of a generation from no air conditioning to everything air conditioned. That work is hard, and it's outdoors, and it's hot. One of my associate producer and one of my editors, I was seeing an exchange. They were trading some notes for an episode, and it was on North Carolina sweet potatoes. And we were out in the fields, and it was August, so it was hot, and I saw the note that the associated producer sent to the editor. Can we do something to get some of Chip's sweat stains damped down so much so that they're not just blasting through on the camera? And I jumped in immediately and said, no, they need to see me sweat. This is not, this is not the Chip Carter glamour show. I mean, there's times where it's pouring off my face.
Yeah.
It's not my shirt. I could just wring it out, and it might not be the most attractive thing you see that day, but it might really make a point with you. And I think a lot of that, Todd, a lot of the answer to why we're not seeing more young people get into farming is because it's hard, and there's no way to sugarcoat it. There is no way. Yeah, the morning is beautiful, and that sunrise is beautiful, and those fields are beautiful, and the rainbows and the rainbirds as they march across the field are beautiful. But good Lord, you're fitting to put in a day every time you go to work, and that day might last. That might be 7 days every week.
Yeah,
and
no, it's
gonna be. So
it's 25 hours a day and 8 days a week, right?
Yeah. So I think like a lot of people, where I hold out a lot of hope, where I believe the industry is going next, automation.
For sure. Yeah, that's going to change. I mean, that's
no other option.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a big change. And
I think young people are going to continue to come to agriculture on their own. Some for the reasons they always have. It's the opportunity that's presented them. Some, the same thing that I was talking about with my kids being 15 years old and getting interested in food and what it means and where it comes from. I think we're going to see even more of that. I think that's why I've got a TV show. That's why I've got this TV show. There is that desire there to know. And as more of this generation knows and finds out, I think they're just going to naturally be drawn to agriculture. I've got a son right now who has started experimentally over the last 4 or 5 years. He's trying to grow everything he can. he would love to get into farming. He's in a different lane in the corporate world right now, but he's looking. He's going. I just there's something about this I just love. There's something about this I just love.
Yeah.
And he's looking into ways to start a little side venture farming. And
Love
I think it's just a kind of business. I don't think it's going to matter if we go recruit people. I think they're going to come in organically. One thing that we see is there are so many family businesses that if you run out of lineage, then you got a problem. But then I see a lot of big companies that were formerly only family businesses. I'll point out Lipman, the big tomato and veg people, who for many generations were known as 6Ls before they took on the family last name, which was Lipman.
Right.
But now there's not very many Lipmans left at Lipman. There are a couple, and their management team, their leadership team, their executive team has come from recruitment. And so it's still a family business, but it's a corporation. It's got to run like a corporation, and it answers to that. So that talent was recruited elsewhere.
Right.
So I think we're going to see some of that, but that, anytime you've got a model that is family driven, how do you attract young people to it? Well, if you're not breeding them, it's kind of tough, because who's going to make room for you in a family business? That's always suspect. Anybody who's ever worked for a family business and wasn't part of the family knows that redheaded stepchild thing. So.
You know it. Yeah, you know it very well. Believe me. Well, let's flip over to the other side of the equation. Talk about things that might be exciting a little bit out there. Whether it be you mentioned automation / technology. I'll add that word to it. Maybe it's organics or some of the new things that are happening in that sector, whatever. But I mean, what kind of excites you right now?
Everything. I mean, where's the water going to come from?
That's an easy answer. I don't. That's an easy answer.
Oh, I'm prepared to talk about it all,
okay.
though, Todd. So yeah, that wasn't a blanket. The water thing is eternally an issue.
Huge.
Part of the reason for my southeastern focus, water's part of it. Southeastern growers don't have unlimited access to water, but they got more water than anybody else. And I look at so many of the situations on the ground in California right now: water, labor, the business climate. It's becoming increasingly difficult to do business in California. Never mind the fact that everything that you grow, you're going to put on a truck and ship across the country to where 80% of the population is. Right. Even 10, 12 years ago, FOB on that eastbound freight was $6,000-$8,000 a truck.
Yeah.
Now it's 14, 16. This week, next week it'll be 18. The week after that, it'll be 20. At what point do we see diminishing returns? And I think when you look at our food supply chain, what you see is a network that is the end result of a wealthy society. And I think that was a luxury that we're not going to have moving forward. People are starting to look at food miles. People are starting to look at food waste. And it's not just for ecological reasons, and it's not just tree huggers who are sitting here going, no, dude, we want the local that was grown by Farmer Brown. Even though in a lot of cases we know Farmer Brown went and bought it at the state terminal farmers market and put it in a peach basket and resold it. But, it's not just that. We're talking about the industry itself is beginning to ask questions. Why are we constantly trucking watermelons from Mexico to Georgia where they grow? I think we're having to be smarter about the food supply chain. And I think we're on the edge of some real change in this industry that's going to be from factors that are going to be ecological. Sustainability is going to be key, and this is all coming from consumers. This is all coming from the people on the street as they become aware. I mean, we got a press release week before the Super Bowl, Todd, from Hellman's Mayonnaise. I'm like, number one, why is mayonnaise sending me,
Sure.
a press release, and it was for their Super Bowl ad, which was Mayo times Mayo, and they had brought on Gerard Mayo, the NFL player and coach, as a spokesperson. And Gerard Mayo and Hellman's Mayo together were teaming up to tackle food waste. What? And the commercial is hilarious. I mean, it's Gerard Mayo. Somebody's throwing something out of their refrigerator and he tackles them, and grandma's doing this. They bring in a cameo from Pete Davidson and other celebrities. And, it's just all about being more mindful.
Right.
I'm not sure Hellman's Mayonnaise really cares if you throw out your 4-day-old lettuce when it could last one more day. But the optics sure are favorable for them. And for them to invest in a Super Bowl ad and that kind of celebrity production budget, they weren't even trying to sell mayonnaise. They were just talking about food waste.
Food waste. Yeah.
And that, to me, that's if we don't get that message as an industry, we're missing it, because they're screaming it. They don't want to waste food. They want to talk about sustainable production, and they're going to start demanding it. And then I think at the very same time, we're going to be looking both as an industry for economic reasons and for marketing reasons. We're going to be reevaluating how far we're sending things and why. Why is the industry switching over to California and Mexico berries April 1st when there's abundant berries? I saw berries last week, February it was, and I was in North Carolina looking at fresh strawberries grown in the field. No hydroponics, no nothing. So I think we're in for a period of much reevaluation, and I think we may see some more regional lines being drawn, and I think that's going to be, I think it's wise. And I think our current system is a byproduct of affluence, and I don't think we affluent no more.
Yeah,
I think we're a little more broke down than we were. So I think we're about to put everything under the microscope, Todd, and start dissecting it and seeing what directions it goes.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that. I think we're going to have to pivot. And we know we're going to have a whole lot more people here to feed, right? I mean, that's coming. And so we're going to have to get smarter. We're going to have to look at these resources, the impact it has on the planet, the impact it has long term. So much I think of what we do something today, we don't necessarily know what its impact is going to be 10 years from now, even though it does have an impact. And I think you're right. These conversations are going to have to be elevated. We're going to have to get smarter about things we do for the climate. We're going to have to get smarter about things we do for the planet. We're going to have to do, from a resource standpoint alone. I agree with you. I think we're at the, kind of the impetus of a revolution in a lot of ways when it comes to our food. And I think if anything, the last 2 years have taught us is the power of food. And that it can make a difference, and it's important. And people are learning how to cook again. People are, they didn't get an opportunity to go drive through like they normally would on a Wednesday, right? Or Taco Tuesday, whatever it might be. It was Taco Tuesday at home. So I think that what I'm excited about is this younger generation. And if there's something positive out of this 2 years in the sense of what we're talking about, I think you got a lot of kids. Yeah, I think you got a lot of kids that got involved in cooking and thinking and food. And I think it's going to be similar to what your son did when he was 15. I think it's going to be a really important thing. So to me, I find that to be really, really exciting, is to see that, hopefully we are breeding into this next generation of consumer, but a consumer that comes from a higher level of consciousness. Yeah. And I think that's going to be really important.
And a desire to be informed and a desire to know. And I mean, this is exactly why my open for the TV show every week is I do my little setup piece, and then whatever it is, I look at the camera and I say, come on, let me take you where the food comes from. Yeah. That's literally what I'm doing. And that's what they want to do. They want to go see where it comes from.
I agree.
So I think part of it is that the industry, I think the unspoken impetus for anybody in agriculture every day is the awareness of that increasing population and the numbers we all walk around with. By 2050, world population is going to grow. How are we going to feed them all?
Yeah.
Well, what we've seen is over the course of the last 60 to 70 years, half of all Americans feeding everybody to 1.5% of all Americans feeding everybody. That is research. That is science. That is technology. That is smarts, man. That's nothing but blazing intellect and dedication and devotion and passion. And I think that's going to continue. And I think, you talk about organics. Well, in an ideal world, everything's organic. We know
used to be.
Yeah, but I mean, we called it the bad old days, Todd. So
Yeah.
we had things like famine and pestilence and these kind of things. So I talk a lot about hard choices, and it's kind of a central theme of the show. We all got to make hard choices every day, starting with when the alarm clock goes off. Do we do what we want to do, which is turn it off and roll back over, or do we get up and do what we have to do? That's the first hard choice we have to make here today. And as individuals, we have to make those choices. As groups, we have to make those choices. As societies and as a world, we have to make those choices. And I think one of those choices that's increasingly coming into play is organic or not organic. I tell people all the time, we are fortunate enough to live in a nation where if you want and can afford to eat organic, you can pretty much do that and not be missing out on anything. Now we know that the chemicals and fertilizers and pesticides, it's not an ideal situation. Then again, that the Romans used powdered lead and arsenic as insecticides on their crops. So we made some progress on some of those. I do feel like the people on the research side into all of this are very, they're not just saying, let's kill all the bugs and to hell with the rest. We ain't worried about it. I think they're saying, how do we protect the environment? How do we, how can we up our game? How can we do it better? And then I never met a farmer who used a nickel's worth more of inputs than was necessary for the crop. Nobody wants to. But this numbers game that we're talking about, these ever increasing numbers, that's another thing about traveling, man. If you sit in one spot, you never have any idea how vast the world is. How many people a billion people is, 3 billion, 5 billion. It's just, you can't comprehend it. You can't put it in a box. But they're here and they're coming and they're going to keep coming. How do we feed them all is one of the big pressing issues of our day. Now, as more advanced societies like ours look and go, all right, now beyond that, not only how can we feed everybody, how can we feed everybody better and healthier? So then the next step in that conversation becomes organic. Well, how do we produce organic to scale to feed everybody and to make price points, something where this is just a normal thing in America and in stores and restaurants and at home. I think part of that is progressive. I think the new, the hothouse model that was developed in Canada that's now going everywhere. You go in one of those spaceships and you're
that's a game changer.
Yeah, it's like, this is how we're going to grow food on Mars.
Not quite, but not quite.
Well,
you know what?
I mean, it's the same. It's that foreign to the idea of dirt farming. To being out in the farm and the dirt and the rows and everything, and then you walk in one of these greenhouses. There's 50-foot tomato vines hanging from the ceiling. Yeah. You're like, this is not a farm like anything I've ever seen in my life. No. I'm very excited about those. I don't, they're not going to put dirt farming out of business. There's a lot of inputs. There's a lot of cost in doing that. But what excites me about it is that everything that's grown in a facility like that is innately organic. So as we scale up that production, that's something to keep an eye on. Maybe that's how we get a larger and larger and larger percentage of organic product, is by not fighting Mother Nature out in the fields, but by bringing it inside.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, I'm very much pro, not all ag technology, but some ag technology. Some's not great, some is. But I agree with you when it comes to these greenhouses. It's something we have to look at. It's real hard to look away, even in the organic sector. It's really hard to look away at the core movement of the organics, 35 years ago, and the belief system that even upholds today. it's hard to look away when you're putting, you're taking 2,000 miles off a truck and you're using 90% less water. And, what you're doing in 13 acres, you take you 300 acres of inputs to do out in the dirt. I mean, it's not, and we're not going to get away with dirt. And I'm not anti-dirt in any way whatsoever. It's just going to be what's next. It's no different than going from a draft horse to a tractor or a payphone on the corner to the cell phone in your pocket. It's a part of that technological train. And that train's left the station. So if we're trying to grab a hold of it to bring it back, y'all ain't strong enough, right? It's gone. And I think that it's going to be important that we start to look at this. And I look from the perspective when we look at technology is how do we raise the bar, right? How do we start to put things in and say, okay, how are you going to be organic? And why are you doing this and this and that? And so to me, I'm all about this open conversation about it. I agree with you. I think it's going to be really fascinating to see where it goes. I've been in these spaceships, to your point. I've seen them. I've walked them. They're very impressive. And you're right. They're not cheap to do. But then again, in 25 years, as these guys are investing, what I call, working the positive cost of food, investing in this, what's it going to be like in 25 years? We don't know. We don't follow that path. But look, if it doesn't get any rain in California, we got a real problem. We haven't had any rain in several months, right? We got a lot and we've got none. We got trees blooming already. We got allergy season already starting. It's California, from your point earlier about water. It's real. I mean, we don't get any more rain this year here in California. I'm expecting that letter from the water department that says you can use 55 gallons a day as a resident. That's something to really take a look at. That's nothing. 55 gallons is not much, right? Every time you think about laundry and taking a shower, whatever the case may be.
Sure.
So I think that we have to look at this. I think we need to look at it with open eyes, and I appreciate your perspective on it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think also too, it takes all of it, Todd. And I think ultimately it's a combination of dirt farming and I mean, this extends to cattle and ranching and poultry and pork and we've even we got an episode coming up in season 2 on the wild caught seafood industry because I kind of came in with the perspective of I bet those folks have to deal with the same kind of regulations and restrictions and headaches that our farmers do, that our land farmers do. Let's go find out. Well, yeah, it's exactly the same. Speak exactly the same language. We're just on a boat. They're just bringing fish up from the bottom of the sea. It's the world's largest farm. So, so it's going to be a combination of all of that. It's going to be the spaceship hot houses. It's going to be the field grown. It's going to be advances in field grown. We got an episode in season 1 called Farming Like It's 1699. We met a farmer in South Carolina named Nat Bradford. And it's Nat and his wife and their 5 kids. And they grow the same crop mix that their ancestors grew on the same land 200 years ago from the same heirloom seeds that have been handed down generation by generation. And it's just extraordinary. It's all biocontrols and they're all ancient. Now he's brought in, advances that have been made. He's not Amish. He's not walking around, going, we cannot use thee if thou wert from the other time. He's going to do that. But I mean, they keep their own beehives. They got the biocontrol plants. So every bit of it, if he didn't have access to a technological component, if his ancestors had not had it in 1699, he doesn't want it now. And he's built a very nice niche business selling that that Bradford branded produce to fancy restaurants in Columbia and Charleston and Atlanta. Now, he can't export that model everywhere, nor does he want to. That's his piece. We got another episode with an urban container farm in downtown St. Petersburg, Florida, where they're taking old shipping containers, something that people 20 years ago started looking at and going, man, these things are piling up everywhere. What are we going to do with these old shipping containers? And where we saw garbage, they saw farms.
Yeah.
And now they're doing greens. They're doing, lettuces and salad stuff and microgreens. They're growing in the refurbished shipping containers on a 1/3 acre lot in downtown St. Petersburg. They're producing 45 acres worth of conventional produce.
Yeah.
And it's the same company is partnered up with a retailer and it's not just here. This is happening everywhere. They're putting those units on site at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, when you're going in and you're buying your lettuce for your salad that night, it was grown 30 feet away, and it walked through the door of the store 20 minutes before you picked it up and took it home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's all of this, and it's a combination of all these things tacked together. And we're going to continue to see this patchwork quilt emerge, and we're going to see new entrants, and we're going to see rooftop farming, and people like our firefighter you mentioned earlier, the mushroom farmer, who just on a whim said, I'm going to see if I can grow some mushrooms. And now he's got a thriving industry out of his home growing gourmet mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's room for everybody at the party. And again, population is doubling. People got to eat no matter what else happens. People got to eat.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's what the beauty of your show, right? Where the food comes from is the fact that you have an opportunity to get into the deep dive into some of these issues and present them. I think, from a very open perspective of like, let's talk about what this is. Right. And I think that's so important. Right. And I think to a point, we talked about media earlier, right? You're talking with people, not at people. And I think that's a big, big difference. And I think that's what wins the day. And I think that's what we need to do in order, in my opinion, to keep propelling these, the positivity we need to be bringing into, food and farming. We need to keep uplifting these guys, because without them, I mean, these guys are the true champions and the backbone of this country. And I think we need to uphold them and hold them in such high esteem. So I love the fact that you've got this platform and you're sharing these stories. It's wonderful. I appreciate it. Thank you for it.
100%. And I had somebody asked me, I actually did a radio interview in North Carolina a couple of days ago, and the guy had seen a presentation that I did. It was a big party the North Carolina Sweet Potato Commission had for us, preview party, watch party. And, during my talking, I don't write speeches or things like that. I just go out and open my mouth and see what happens. And the radio guy, the guy who was interviewing me, was like, it was amazing to me at the preview party with all the people in the room. He said, it's your show and you're walking around, your name's on it. He said, but at every turn you pivoted and shined the light on the farmers and gave the credit to the farmers and gave credit to the growers. So I don't grow anything. I'm not, it's not, we were meeting with a marketing agency and somebody said, who's the star of the show? And I'm like, huh? What? What do you mean? What do you mean? Who's the star of the show? Well, it's not Seinfeld. I've already told you that. It's who's the star. The farmers are the star.
It's the story.
Farmers are the star. And then somebody said, he's the host. They're the star. I'm like, that's it. That's it exactly. So, I mean, I'm just taking people with me on my journeys. I've been a wanderer. Something about being a PK who moves every 2 or 3 years. It just gets in you. There's nothing I like more than waking up someplace and going to sleep someplace else. And seeing something new and fascinating along the way, and then to have a chance to share it with people is just extraordinary. And for it to be these stories that mean so much and that resonate with us all, again, as you've been saying all along, food is so personal. It's not just sustenance. It's not just nutrition. It's everything. It's how we bond. It's how we survive. It's part of our joy in life. Oh my gosh, that's delicious. Oh, have you ever had a fresh orange right off the tree? Have you ever broken a watermelon in the field and just sat down and scooped it up with both hands and let it run down your arms? So
it's pretty neat experience.
Yeah, it really is.
I love it. What a great wrap up. What a great conversation. I mean, this has been a blast. It really has.
Yeah. I mean, I have no idea how long we've been going. They might pull us off the air at some point.
We get deplatformed for this. I could do far better to get deplatformed. Trust me.
Yeah.
No.
Anybody who's still listening, send us an email and you'll get a prize. We'll figure out what it is.
Yeah. No, they're still listening. I don't even know. I look at it this way. I still got battery power on the cameras. The lights.
There you go.
We're still good. The light.
We're rolling.
We're fine. We're fun. No, but really a ton of fun. And I want to switch gears a little bit and have a little fun with you. I'll throw a couple different questions at you.
Sure.
All right. Because I think I'm curious to know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how strict were your parents?
Mom 11, Dad 1.
Okay, 100%. So how about you though? How about you on a scale with your kids?
They always knew what they were supposed to do and how they were supposed to do it and when they were supposed to do it, and almost all the time they did.
There you
So
go.
fortunately, it very rarely came up.
I
Uh,
love it.
I don't know why. I've thought many times. I'm really blessed, but I never. None of our kids ever even got maybe a swat on the bottom when they're still wearing diapers and walking towards the fireplace, and you're like, no, you can't go in the fireplace.
Good life lesson there.
But other than that, the needs for discipline were just very, very rare.
I love it.
We've been very blessed.
Yeah, me too. We've been very fortunate. We've been
our kids have been pretty much trouble free. So,
what personality trait got you in the most trouble?
Oh, my smart mouth.
Don't have to. Enough said.
I love to make people laugh, and sometimes that might be at an inappropriate time, and sometimes it might just put somebody's button the wrong way. But hands down, my smart mouth.
I got to go with you there. I got to say I'm not sure what my parents would say the top three are, but I'm pretty sure that's got to be 1, 2, or 3. Probably more like 1 and 2.
Right.
If I was guessing. What is anybody ever asked? When I was doing my work and diving, has anybody ever accused you of being Jimmy Carter's son?
Oh man, especially in print, Todd. Think about it.
I know.
Back in the day, they didn't have you put pictures in the newspaper. It was a luxury. A color picture in a newspaper, you would never even think of such. So, yeah, in some places, especially when I started spreading out and getting into bigger papers and bigger publications, and magazines, there were some who would run a disclaimer at the end of every article going, Jim Carter is not the son of former President James Earl Carter. He is a writer from Atlanta, Georgia. For that reason. And I mean, I played around with my byline for 100 years. I was kind of like, well, everywhere I go, people's like Chip Carter, and you do all the work, and that guy get all the credit. So I was Chip C. Carter and C. Baxter Carter, and all of this combination of things that just didn't work. And I was just trying, and I lived in Georgia at the time, so it was even worse. It was even worse. Well, so then,
little VIP action though. You walk up the front of the line, you want to get into a restaurant, so it's like, hey,
never happened, because then you get there and you're not that Chip Carter, and that just doesn't work out well for you.
that would be a drawback.
Yeah,
plus, I think he's like 90.
The president is, but I think his son is not quite that old. But it was real funny when starting my whole career that way and living in the shadow of that name. I moved to Tampa about 20 years ago, and I was like, one cool thing is once I get to Tampa, at least nobody's going to confuse me. There won't be any, I get here literally, Todd, the first night I'm here, we get moved in, I turn the news on, they come in, and now here's Chip Carter with Fox Sports.
There you go.
And he was on the air until about 4 or 5 years ago. So at that point, I just gave up. And I said, I don't care. I don't care. I'm who I am, and y'all can figure out. People can figure it out for themselves.
I got one final question before we wrap up our time. You've had an amazing career. You've done a lot of things for a long time. 10 plus years. You're out. You're telling stories. You're meeting people. I know to what you just said earlier, you're a guy that would have no problem plopping on somebody's sofa, to hang out and have a great, get to know people and part of your experience. And I think
might spend the night there.
Yeah, right. But I think that's really a powerful thing. And it says a lot about you too, right? That you go in with such an open heart when you do these things, and you see, like I told you earlier, you wear it on your sleeve when you do your show. It's not hard. It's not hard to see what I believe is the true you out there when you're talking. So I guess final question is that, as you've met these folks that are out making a difference with our food, what do you think is the most common similarity that you see out there with folks
in our world?
Yeah,
a true love of their fellow man and a true love of humanity. In the Christian faith, it would be attributed to Christian characteristics. In the larger world, it's just good people. And
Yeah.
it's hard. I get goosebumps, and I'm literally getting them right now, just thinking about these people. And there's only one reason they do it, and that's because they genuinely love other people, and they genuinely want to help. Now, there's a lot of them who would sit there and go, I won't give you a nickel for so and such, but they do. They do.
Yeah.
You do something else. This work's too hard. Very rewarding when it's done right. And it's very rewarding on a lot of levels. But I think that's it. I think this is the most loving, giving, caring industry in the world. And there's nothing that there's nothing else I could be part of that would make me any happier or prouder than to represent these people and to take some of these small town stories and shine some light on really probably the most heroic sector of Americans that we have.
Well, that is a heck of a good place to wrap this up. As I say, we'll drop a Sharpie right there on that one. That is pretty sharp. Ladies and gentlemen, where the food comes from, RFD-TV, Thursday nights, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 on the Pacific. Once you get it hooked up, and then again, I got to throw a little plug, a little Molly B. I'm just saying, a little touch of Molly B and make your, on top of a little where the food comes from, make the week better. Just saying. Check him out. Chip Carter. Love you, man.
If you're on the West Coast, it will come on again at 10:30. So you got 6:30 and 10:30. You need to start a little earlier, Steph.
Not in my house. There's no 10:30 in my house.
Fair enough. Set your DVRs, everybody. Set
there
your
you
DVRs.
Go.
Todd, thank you so much.
This was an absolute pleasure. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out. What a great conversation. What a great chat. What a great guy. Go check out what he's doing. It's worth your time. It's worth your energy. I talk about it all the time. Inspiration. It's very important. Whether, just saying hello to somebody is a source of inspiration. This show will touch you. This show will make your day better. There'll be a conversation you can sit around and have with your kids. Share these stories with them and talk it through, because they're going to learn something. It's so powerful. And food's very important. We all need to have it. That food, sunshine, water, those are things we all need, right? So lean into it. Thanks for being here. Don't forget to check us out on social media, and we'll see everybody soon. Take care.